Hi, this is Larry Bauer, Chief Executive Officer of the Family Medicine Education Consortium, and I'm delighted this evening to be talking with Dr. Delicia Haynes, a physician who's board certified in family medicine and obesity medicine, and she's the founder of Family First Health Center in Daytona Beach, Florida. Dr. Haynes, thank you so much for joining with us.
My pleasure.
And may I have the privilege of calling you Delicia?
Absolutely, especially since
Thanks
you pronounced it correctly.
I try. So tell us about your background. Where did you come from, and how did you end up going to medical school and residency?
So I'm an Army brat. I grew up kind of all over the world, and we settled in Kentucky. From an early age, I decided I either wanted to be a doctor, a teacher, or a lawyer, and then I found out if I became a doctor, I could kind of do like all three with the advocacy and the teaching. I went to medical school went to undergrad at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, and then medical school at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, and decided I wanted to, treat, all people and ages, and decided to go into family medicine, and did my residency program here in Daytona Beach at Halifax.
Great. And then after you finished residency, what happened?
So my third year of residency, so I've always had a really strong vision for how I wanted to practice medicine because I had been a patient and I had a terrible experience. So it was really all about being the type of physician that I wish I'd had. So when it was time to graduate, I actually decided to open up my own practice after much prayer because I knew I couldn't go out and join another entity and be able to practice in line with my values. So I started Family First Health Center right out of residency in 2009, and it was an insurance-based clinic for 6 years. And I basically built my own prison unintentionally. Heart was in the right place, but the type of medicine that I wanted to provide and, kind of what insurance companies and, everything else was kind of pressuring us towards really weren't a good match.
And then?
So I went to the Direct Primary Care Conference in 2014, and Erica Bliss was on the dais, as well as there was a I forget his name, but he owns I think it's Integrative Medicine of Asheville, and he went to
Jack Christelle.
Yes. So he was there, and because I think whenever you go to these conferences, you kind of are looking for someone who either has a similar background to you, as far as like, would this work for me? And so I knew that there were a lot of like older physicians who were on the panel, and but he went to Florida State University, which it's a pretty new medical school. So I knew he was younger than me. So I went up to him afterwards and just was asking him a lot of questions, and spoke with Dr. Bliss as well, asked her a lot of questions, and spoke with everyone, and left that conference not with the decision to go into direct primary care, but just the realization that I had more options than what I was looking at, and that fee-for-service wasn't the only way to go. And from that conference, I went to the American Academy of Private Physicians, I think it is, conference.
Right.
I went to a lot of conferences, so I was like a professional tire kicker, and just kind of saw the that side, and there was kind of more of a traditional concierge side, and then there was a direct primary care route that Brian Forrest came and taught. So learned a lot there. Had a lot of information, and when you have that much information, you just do nothing. And I was comfortable in my discomfort at my clinic at that point. I kind of decided that, I created this and I just made my bed and I'm going to lay in it. Unlike physicians who kind of went to work for another company, they could say, oh, it was the man that did this. Well, I was the man. I'm the person that created this. But later that fall in 2014, my biller was poached by one of the larger hospitals because all of my colleagues were selling their practices. The large organizations needed billers, so they started poaching billers from private offices. So that happened, and then I got a contract in the mail from it was actually my health insurance carrier, and my rates as a patient had went up by over 10%, and then I got a contract in the mail as a provider with a 40% cut to some of the services that I billed. So at that point, I recognized that basically where I was became very uncomfortable because I knew that I was going to have to either double how many patients I saw per day in order to stay where I was, or fire staff to decrease the overhead. And that's when I kind of put that plan in action as far as going forward with direct primary care, into gear. And at the time, I was also really almost clinically depressed. So from a transition standpoint, it wasn't the best time for me to make, big decisions. But, I did it, and we're still successful, even in with all of that.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and you and I have had a chance to talk over the years, and you're it's hard to think of you as someone who was depressed given the stress of what you had, because you're always such a delight to be talking with. So tell us what's happening with your practice now. So when did you make your transition to direct primary care?
So I started my transition in March of 2015, and I didn't do it all at once, which now knowing more, I would recommend when I'm talking to other people, I kind of recommend they do it more all at once. I'm single head of household, so every bill has my name on it. So I didn't feel comfortable kind of jumping in and having one day and, saying everybody goes on this one day. So I did kind of a two-step conversion where I had all of my commercial patients ended at the end of March 2015, and then I kept Medicare for another year. With the thought process being that I knew that Medicare could basically cover my transition, so I'd still have enough of an income as I was building up, because I could have gone out and gotten, a job, and I lined up those opportunities just in case I needed them from an economic standpoint. But from a mental health standpoint, I knew I didn't really need to put any more on my plate than what I already had. So that unintentionally created some confusion in my practice, because anytime you're not super clear and just coming out with, one message, people were getting the idea that, well, she's not all in. And so it's important when I'm kind of talking to other people who are transitioning, how important it is to have that message of this is what I'm doing and this is all in. And I would say it's especially important for female physicians. And one of my patients who we have kind of a unique relationship in that my patients feel very comfortable saying things to me that outside the clinic walls they could get stoned for. But he said after he got my letter, he made the comment that, well, my wife changes her mind all the time, so I just thought you were going through a phase and that you were going to change your mind. So I didn't really think that this was something that you're going to go forward with. And, I brought to his attention, one, that I'm not his wife, and that I've never been one to kind of put something out there and then kind of go back against it. So, but I say that just because there are kind of those notions that people have. And so it's really important to be very, very clear in, what you're doing and your messaging. And again, I mentioned about kind of the mental health piece. I wasn't in the best place when I was going through all this. And so, some of that kind of came through as well. But so we, started the transition commercial, and then, did the transition as far as the Medicare patients, and started also to appeal to some of the small businesses, especially the ones that, were vendors that we were using their products in town and that sort of thing. And now we are a little bit over 3 years, and I want to say we're about 450 patients who are paying as agreed, which is the only number that I really care about. We've got some other people who are technically on the roster, but we've got to chase them. So I really count the people who are actually supporting the business.
That's great. So you're double boarded, family medicine and obesity medicine. Tell me how that you use that in your practice with your patients.
Right. So I got certified. I was the first physician in Delicia County to get their board certification in obesity medicine. And at the time, I was still in the fee-for-service world, and I think I was thinking about, one, it's something that I wanted to be able to address more effectively with my own patients and kind of just have more tools in the toolbox there. And then also, at the time was thinking of, okay, maybe we can create like an alternative income stream, by focusing on this. And now that I'm in direct primary care, I've really kind of incorporated that in. I love counseling patients, and I love lifestyle medicine. So I use a lot of the kind of behavioral medicine techniques when I'm counseling people. I'm also a certified coach. So I'm definitely not an enabling type. I'm an empowering type. And really just, kind of have incorporated the obesity medicine training just into my regular practice.
So are you seeing any of your patients reversing their chronic diseases?
Oh, absolutely. So we've got patients that we've been able to take totally off of their insulin, off of their diabetic medications, and we, with direct primary care, it's easier to stay in touch with people. So that accountability piece, whether it's obesity, whether it's, their dietary control, and are they actually checking their blood sugars and keeping their food logs? It's really empowering when people realize how much control they have over their, over their diabetes, especially their type 2 diabetes. A lot of people just feel like it's fatalistic and there's nothing really they can do. But once they actually see that, this is what my number was, this is what I was eating, and, this is what happened, and they see how much power they have either way, allows them to make kind of empowered decisions. Sometimes, make decisions that we know are bad for us. But, it's nice that they really understand, how much power they have. And then when they start to see that early success, it really becomes that kind of success begets more success. And that's where I think a lot of our growth has come, definitely word of mouth, but word of mouth in that area specifically from the patients who have been able to get off their medications and have really been able to make great strides in their physical health as well as their mental health, because that's definitely a huge focus for me.
Well, I imagine that's got to be pretty satisfying for you as the physician providing that kind of service, helping people change their lives.
It is, absolutely. And I think so on a professional level, that's definitely true. And then on the personal side too, when I had built my fee-for-service clinic, that outwardly was very successful, and people were patting me on the back for doing it right out of residency and whatnot. I was a complete hypocrite when it came to self-care. So when I was telling other people they needed to sleep 8 hours and that, how important it was for them to eat nutritiously and decrease the stress in their life and exercise, I wasn't doing, barely any of that. And by the time I finished seeing patients, it was time to kind of turn to the business side of medicine and, get that done. And so now I'm actually really kind of like a role model, for my patients. So I was in a pretty bad car accident in April, and so I used to row in the Halifax River with the Rowing Association prior to my accident, and had several patients who came out to learn to row, to learn how to row because, I was doing it. And they also knew that there were certain times of day that I would be unavailable because I'm in the middle of the river. And so it was things like that I just never would have been able to even get out of the office for.
Right.
And then like community, I always wanted to be a community doctor, and we've always done like free sports physicals every year. And we also started we call it cut high blood pressure, where I had a patient come in and notice that his haircut was immaculate, but his blood pressure was in the stroke range. And I knew that, he was sitting in someone's barber chair at least every 2 weeks. So if I can kind of interface them there and not wait for them to come to my clinic, then, maybe we can do some better management. So I went and bought a whole bunch of blood pressure cuffs and, made some signage and went out and taught barbers and stylists how to screen for high blood pressure in their salons. So while their clients are waiting for them, they can, kind of check and see where they stand. And they had like a little card that had what normal was and, all of that. So that worked really well.
That's fantastic. I'm wondering if you could comment on this. So I've heard a number of people in medicine and elsewhere criticize direct primary care physicians because they say, well, they're just cherry picking. They're just taking care of, people of significant means who can afford monthly membership fees. Could you comment on that in terms of what you're seeing in your practice?
Right. So in my practice, I want to say 40% are uninsured. So for those people, it's kind of like, I'm it. And so that's where like the advocacy really comes in, because if it's not primary care and I need to send them to someone, I need to negotiate directly for them. And that's kind of like when people ask, because a lot of people think of us as concierge physicians, and some in the direct primary care community get really riled up when they're called concierge. I really don't take it offense or anything to it. But traditionally, concierge clinics cost a lot more, whereas direct primary care clinics, one of the elements is the affordability of them. So I've never had, I have had some patients who have, been in economic hard times. No one has said that our rates are too high. They might just say, well, we're going through kind of a hard time. And any of our patients that let us know or we reach out to them and they actually return our phone calls or answer the phone, we work with them. We have some, of course, that kind of go and, you never hear from them again. But, if someone's going through a hard time, we can work with them. But, definitely we're seeing people who, they have jobs, but they can't afford insurance. They are having difficulty with getting their medications. They work for some place that, doesn't offer insurance, and we've been able to help a lot of small business owners like myself, because I always wanted to provide health benefits for my team and couldn't really afford to do it. It was cost prohibitive for us. So, we knew that, hey, 90% of what people go to the doctor for is primary care. So we can offer that service, to these other small business owners, and they've been able to pick that up for their team as a benefit. So we've got people who are, their hospitality industry in Daytona Beach is pretty big. So a lot of people who clean the rooms in the hotels and that sort of thing are our patients. And then we also have the CEOs of companies as well. So, it does run the gamut, but definitely most people consider us kind of more blue-collar concierge.
Wonderful. So as we're finishing up here, I'm wondering if you might have any advice for students or residents or docs in practice who are looking for a better alternative for them to practice medicine. Any words of advice?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, because I look at direct primary care really as a business model, and I don't think it's for everybody, but I do think it's for a lot of physicians. So I think the first thing is to look at what you value and what you want. What kind of practice did you envision when you signed up and went to medical school, and then you find a business model that supports that. For me, direct primary care has been that business model. That having the membership, it makes it a lot easier to have that kind of continual interaction with patients, and not feel like you're being taken advantage of or anything like that. Where in fee for service, if you're staying late answering a bunch of phone calls, you know that you're not getting paid for that, and that's time away from your family. But I think really getting in touch with why you went into medicine in the first place, and from that space, finding a business model that can support that.
I think that's sage advice. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Haynes, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And do you want to mention your website so it's part of the podcast here if people would like to find you?
Sure. So if people want to find me, they can. Our practice is Family First Health Center. It's familyfirsthealthcenter.com. And then I mentioned kind of the mental health piece. I also speak on like depression, both for medical students and physicians. And I do kind of a weekly Facebook Live where I'm kind of just encouraging people in that space. And that's Dr. Delicia MD, so DRDELICIA MD, across all social media.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.